A famous female tourist mocked the royal guards to get attention. What happened next shocked everyone. Want to know how this story ends? Subscribe to the channel and watch more videos to promote respect for the royal guards. Buckingham Palace stood in all its splendor beneath the brilliant afternoon sun, its iconic stone facade glowing with quiet majesty. For centuries, it had watched over Britain's royal history, and today, as always, it drew visitors from every corner of the world. Outside the grand black and gold gates, the square buzzed with activity. Tourists pressed close to the railings, cameras raised high, hoping to capture even a glimpse of the palace's grandeur. Children pointed with excitement, while parents explained the significance of where they stood. The air was filled with the sounds of many languages: French, Spanish, Mandarin, English, all blending together in a cheerful hum of admiration and curiosity. But it wasn't just the building that held people's attention. At the center of the crowd's fascination stood the royal guards. Dressed in bright red tunics, polished boots, and their towering black bearskin hats, they stood motionless, silent, and focused. Not a blink, not a shift, not a single word. Their presence alone conveyed discipline, respect, and centuries of unbroken tradition. To many, especially older onlookers, they weren't just ceremonial figures. They were living symbols of honor and service, reminders of values that never go out of style. In that moment, all eyes were on them. Amid the respectful crowd gathered outside Buckingham Palace, one figure stood out sharply. Her name was Karen Miller, an American tourist dressed in a sleek burgundy pantsuit that shimmered in the sunlight. Gold accessories sparkled at her wrists and neck, and her blonde hair was styled in perfect waves, as if she had stepped straight out of a fashion magazine. In her manicured hand, she held the latest smartphone, already live-streaming her every move to thousands of followers online. Unlike the other visitors, Karen wasn't interested in the meaning behind the ceremony or the history it represented. For her, this wasn't a moment to quietly appreciate tradition. It was a stage. She wasn't there to admire. She was there to be admired. With a smirk on her face and a voice louder than the murmurs of the respectful crowd, she made herself the center of attention. Rules didn't apply to her. The royal guards were not symbols of national pride in her eyes. They were props in her personal broadcast. She strutted toward the barriers, not with wonder, but with entitlement, determined to provoke a reaction. Her goal wasn't understanding or appreciation. It was views, attention, and going viral, whatever the cost. As the sun beat down on the square, Karen Miller's behavior began to shift from merely attention-seeking to outright disrespectful. With her phone still recording, she raised her voice above the hum of the crowd, shouting remarks aimed directly at one of the royal guards. "Are you even human?" she called out mockingly, drawing startled glances from nearby tourists. Her tone was sharp, laced with sarcasm, as if the entire ceremony was nothing more than a joke to her. The guard, standing tall in his red tunic and bearskin hat, remained motionless, his gaze fixed forward with unwavering discipline. The crowd grew quiet, sensing the tension. While most visitors respected the solemnity of the moment, Karen continued. She took a step closer, narrowing the distance between herself and the soldier. Then, in a bold act of provocation, she raised her hand and snapped her fingers directly in front of his face, so close that she nearly brushed his nose. Still, the guard didn't move, no flinch, no reaction, just silence and stillness, as if he had not even seen her. To many in the crowd, it was a powerful display of restraint, but to Karen, it was an invitation to push further. Without warning, Karen Miller crossed a line that no one expected. As if trying to prove a point to her online followers, she suddenly pulled her hand back and slapped the royal guard across the face. The sharp sound of the strike cut through the air like a crack of thunder, startling the entire crowd into silence. Gasps rippled through the square. Some tourists instinctively covered their mouths. Others stood frozen in disbelief. A few, already holding up their phones, began recording, their cameras now capturing something far more serious than a tourist prank. What had been a moment of mockery instantly transformed into something much darker. The atmosphere shifted from light curiosity to alarm. People began murmuring, asking one another if they had really just seen what they thought they saw. The guard, despite the physical contact, did not move. His posture remained unchanged, his expression unreadable. But the air around him seemed to grow heavier, filled with unspoken tension. Many in the crowd understood immediately. This was no longer a harmless act of foolishness. Karen had just committed a serious offense, one that violated long-standing British laws and disrespected a sacred symbol of national tradition. The mood turned from amusement to unease. Then something truly unexpected happened. The royal guard, who had stood perfectly still despite all of Karen's taunts, suddenly took a sharp, deliberate step forward. It was a single movement, but it shattered the illusion of his total immobility. The crowd collectively gasped. Royal guards are famously trained not to react to provocations, no matter how severe. For one of them to move, even by a step, meant something serious had occurred. Tension swept through the square like a sudden gust of wind. For the first time, the atmosphere turned cold, heavy with anticipation. Karen was visibly stunned. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, her confident posture faltered. But with her phone still recording and thousands of followers watching her live stream, she forced a smile. "Finally woke up, did you?" she said, attempting a shaky laugh. Her voice trembled, just enough for the crowd to notice. She had been in control just moments earlier, the star of her own show. But now the roles were beginning to reverse. The guard didn't say a word. He stood tall, his breathing heavier now, but his expression remained unreadable. The silence between them grew louder than any insult Karen had thrown. Something had changed, and everyone could feel it. Determined to reclaim control of the situation, Karen raised her hand again, intending to deliver a second slap. But this time, the guard reacted. In one swift, precise motion, he reached out and firmly seized her wrist. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. His grip was unyielding, not violent, but resolute. For the first time, Karen's confidence cracked. The laughter, the bravado, the live stream, all of it faltered in that instant. The guard leaned forward slightly, his cold blue eyes locking with hers. His voice, though quiet, carried the weight of authority. "You have assaulted a member of the Royal Guard." Karen stood frozen, stunned by the words she had just heard. The crowd, once amused or indifferent, began to shift in mood. Phones continued to record, but the expressions behind them had changed. No one was laughing now. Instead, there were whispers of disapproval, murmurs of agreement. With the guard's calm but firm response, Karen tried to pull away, but the soldier's grip held steady. For the first time in her carefully curated public life, she was no longer in control. The attention she had once demanded now turned against her. The spectacle she had created had become her own downfall. Realizing she had lost control of the situation, Karen instinctively turned and tried to run. Panic now replaced her earlier confidence. But before she could take more than a few steps, the sound of heavy boots striking the stone pavement echoed through the square. From the main gates of Buckingham Palace, 3 more royal guards emerged in perfect formation. Tall, composed, and unmistakably resolute, they moved with precision, every step deliberate, every expression unreadable. The crowd parted without thinking, their bodies forming a barrier behind Karen. Ahead of her, the advancing guards blocked any path forward. Karen came to a halt, trapped. She was no longer the center of attention in the way she had intended. Her audience, once curious or amused, had turned solemn. Their phones were still raised, but now they recorded something else entirely. The slow, inevitable fall of a woman who believed she was untouchable. Her designer sunglasses couldn't hide the rising panic in her eyes. She looked left, then right, but there was no escape. The crowd surrounded her, and the royal guards now flanked her. In the heart of one of London's most revered locations, Karen found herself utterly alone, out of options, and moments away from facing the consequences of her actions. Before Karen could gather herself, another royal guard approached from the side with swift precision. Without a word, he reached out, firmly twisting her arm behind her back and locking it in place. The force was not excessive, but there was no mistaking the authority behind the movement. Karen cried out in shock, struggling against the grip, but there was no escape. She had been caught, not just physically, but publicly and unmistakably. The crowd, which had once watched her antics with amusement or confusion, now erupted in applause. Some cheered, others shouted words of approval. There were no sympathetic faces in the sea of onlookers, only phones held high, capturing every humiliating second of her downfall. The moment spread instantly. Her arrest, unfolding in front of Buckingham Palace, was being streamed live by several tourists. Within minutes, clips began circulating online, viewed by thousands and soon millions. The footage showed her being restrained, her expensive phone slipping from her hand, landing on the stone pavement. There was no escaping the lens, no controlling the narrative. She had made herself the main character, but in a story she could no longer direct. Her humiliation wasn't just public, it was global, and it had only just begun. By the following morning, Karen Miller's name was everywhere. What had begun as a foolish stunt at Buckingham Palace had turned into an international scandal. British newspapers featured bold headlines: "American tourist arrested for assaulting royal guard." News anchors discussed the story with disbelief. On social media, the clip of her slap and her swift arrest was spreading like wildfire. TikTok banned her account for violating community guidelines. Instagram disabled her comments. Her videos, once filled with luxury shopping hauls and lifestyle tips, were now flooded with messages of outrage and disappointment. Brand after brand issued public statements, cutting ties with her. Sponsorships disappeared overnight. High-end fashion labels that once praised her image now erased her from their platforms. Her follower count dropped by the hundreds of thousands. Even her most loyal fans turned away. No apology video could save her. People weren't interested in excuses. They saw her actions as arrogant and unacceptable. Proof that influence and wealth do not place anyone above the law or tradition. Karen had spent years building a glamorous public image, but in less than 24 hours, it all crumbled. The attention she once craved had returned, but this time it brought only shame and silence. In a last attempt to salvage what remained of her reputation, Karen Miller recorded an apology video. Sitting in her designer living room, she looked into the camera and spoke softly, claiming it had all been a mistake. She said she was sorry, but the damage was done, and no one was willing to listen. The internet, as the world had come to understand, never forgets. Her tearful apology was quickly drowned out by the same video clips of her slapping the royal guard and being handcuffed in front of the crowd. These clips had now become viral memes. Her shocked expression and failed excuses mocked with captions like, "When you realize rules apply to everyone." What was once a glamorous life, filled with admiration, luxury, and influence, had turned into a cautionary tale. Karen, who once inspired millions online, was now the face of arrogance and consequence. Parents showed their children the video not for entertainment, but as a reminder, respect matters, and no amount of followers can protect you from accountability. Karen Miller's story had become more than a scandal. It had become a lesson for the digital age, one that would be remembered long after the headlines faded. As the dust settled and the noise of the crowd faded, the royal guard did not speak a word. He didn't scold, he didn't show anger, and he didn't demand attention. With calm, unwavering discipline, he simply returned to his post. He stood tall, silent, and still, just as he had before the chaos. It was as if Karen Miller had never existed. That quiet act said more than any words could. In his stillness was a powerful message. Dignity does not need drama. Karen, watching from behind the police line, realized something she had never understood before. Fame, attention, followers, all of it could vanish in seconds. The respect she had once taken for granted could not be bought back. No matter how much money she had, or how many apologies she offered, the world she had once ruled with her phone and her confidence had turned its back on her. And yet the royal guard, nameless and faceless to the crowd, stood stronger than ever, not with force, but with principle. In that moment, it became clear. In a world obsessed with noise, it is quiet strength and honor that stand the test of time. This story, though dramatic, carries a clear lesson. In a world where attention can be bought and rules bent, there are still places, like Buckingham Palace, where honor stands firm. And there are still people, like the Royal Guard, who remind us that discipline and tradition are not things of the past. They're values to be protected. In the end, Karen Miller wasn't brought down by the Guard. She was brought down by her own arrogance. And the man she tried to provoke? He won. Not by fighting back, but by standing tall. Just as he always had.